The Klingon raiding beams seared the screaming Neso colonists into charred ash, their defenseless bodies crumbling, even as the rapacious reptiles laughed and gloated over their helplessness and the sickening stench of burning flesh and failure. Dennis Reyes slammed his calloused fist down on the tarnished console, the intelligence report flickering, a grim reminder of the ongoing war between the aggressive, reptilian Klingon Empire and the peaceful, amphibious Neso collective. The Neso distress calls echoed still, unheard, unanswered by the callous major galactic powers who saw the gentle Neso as unworthy of concern, unworthy of saving. Dennis's jaw clenched in impotent rage. The report noted in cold detail that the superior Klingon war machine had conquered over 70% of Neso space. Millions dead, brutalized, forgotten. Her story he knew too well, his own kind humanity, had once knelt helpless and bleeding before the galaxy's cruel indifference. Dennis closed his eyes, remembering the defiant spark, deep in humanity's core, that had saved them. The spark that drove them to seize their destiny in iron-gripped hands, to forge their own path to the stars in blood and fire and sacrifice. A sudden alarm blared, dragging Dennis back to the present, back to his cramped aging quarters on the UES Dauntless. The worn, outdated patrol ship shuddered around him as he leapt up. A damaged Neso ship had just emerged from FTL, a massive Klingon warship in close pursuit. The Neso plea for aid crackled across comms before dissolving in static. "Battle stations, shields up," Captain Chen Shu ordered over the ship-wide comm. "But hold fire. We can't engage that battle cruiser directly. Not with our scrap weapons. It'd be suicide." Dennis stalked onto the bridge, sidearm already drawn. Enough cowering, enough apathy. The Dauntless would meet the Klingons head-on, would save the Neso even if it was humanity's last stand. Because watching another species burn, it went against everything humanity stood for now, their purpose, their promise. The Neso needed them, needed the humans, even if it killed every last one of them to do it. Dennis's orders ignited a fire in the Dauntless's crew, their hands flying over control panels, with newfound urgency and purpose. On the view screen, the massive Klingon warship loomed ever closer, a steel behemoth bristling with weaponry. Dennis opened a hail, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "This is Commander Dennis Reyes of the UES Dauntless. You are ordered to stand down immediately or be fired upon." The Klingon commander's reptilian visage filled the screen, his eyes cold and predatory. Cromac laughed, a harsh grating sound. "You must be truly desperate to interfere here, human. Your puny ship is no match for the might of the Klingon Empire." He flicked his forked tongue over jagged teeth. "The Neso are weak, and the weak deserve only subjugation or death. That is the way of things." Dennis's eyes narrowed to slits. "The way of things is about to change," he growled. He cut the transmission with a stab of his finger. "Arm forward plasma cannons," he snapped at Lieutenant Neso, the lanky amphibian already hunched over the weapons console. "Ready a full spread of torpedoes. Cromac wants to dance, let's show him some new steps." The Dauntless surged forward, her engines flaring bright as she accelerated to attack speed. Cromac's ship opened fire, searing beams of energy lashing out to slam against the Dauntless's shields in blinding flashes. The deck shuddered beneath the crew's feet. Dennis wrenched the ship into a sharp turn, the inertial dampeners straining as he narrowly evaded a barrage of incoming missiles. Gritting his teeth, Dennis lined up a shot, the targeting reticle flashing red. "Fire!" Incandescent plasma leapt from the Dauntless forward batteries, twin lances of pure destruction that pierced the Klingon's shields in a shower of sparks and tore into the ship's hull, leaving molten gashes in their wake. Cromac's roar of rage echoed across the comms, even as damage alarms blared on his bridge. "All cannons, return fire! Crush that impudent earther!" The two ships traded blows, the Dauntless weaving and dodging as best she could. But the Klingon ship's superior firepower took its toll. The Dauntless shields flickered once, twice, then failed entirely. A shot from Cromac's gunners found its mark, blasting a ragged hole in the Dauntless's port nacelle. The ship lurched sickeningly. Reroute auxiliary power to compensate, Dennis shouted over the screech of overstressed metal. His fingers danced across his console, rerouting system after system. Helm, bring us about for another pass. The ship shuddered again as another explosion rocked the bridge. Acrid smoke began to fill the air, the sharp tang of fried circuitry and scorched plastic. Sweat dripped into Dennis's eyes, but he blinked it away, refusing to let up. They couldn't fail. Not here. Not now. Another explosion ripped through the bridge, showering Dennis with sparks. No matter how hard the Dauntless fought, the Klingon battlecruiser outclassed them in every way. Dennis gritted his teeth. They couldn't win this head-on. "Gunners!" Dennis shouted over the chaos. "Concentrate fire on their sensor array, and take out their comms antenna while you're at it. Blind them and cut them off from their fleet." The gunners acknowledged the order, their fingers flying over the weapons console. A heartbeat later, a volley of torpedoes streaked from the Dauntless forward tubes, lancing through space towards the Klingon ship. The first salvo went wide. The second found its mark, detonating against the battlecruiser's sensor array in a brilliant flash. The comms antenna shattered under the barrage, debris spinning off into the void. On the Klingon bridge, Cromac snarled in frustration as his view screens dissolved into static. The Dauntless had vanished from his targeting computers. His claws gouged deep furrows into his command chair. With the Klingon ship's technological advantage neutralized, Dennis pressed the attack. "Helm, bring us in close," Dennis commanded, a predatory glint in his eye. "Right under their belly, let's see how they like a knife to the gut." The Dauntless surged forward, its battered hull groaning in protest. Klingon disruptor fire lashed out at the human ship, but without their targeting sensors, the shots went wide, green beams searing past the Dauntless's flanks. Dennis deftly guided his ship through the storm, weaving and juking, until the Dauntless was nestled directly beneath the Klingon battlecruiser's unprotected underbelly. The Dauntless's cannons erupted, spitting searing plasma into the Klingon ship's hull at point-blank range. Explosions blossomed across the battlecruiser's underside as the Dauntless's relentless barrage tore through deck after deck. Geysers of atmosphere and debris burst from the gaping wounds, bodies spilling out into the pitiless vacuum of space. On the Klingon bridge, emergency sirens blared as consoles erupted in fountains of sparks. Cromac roared his fury over the din, his bridge crew scrambling frantically to contain the damage. Just as Dennis was about to press the advantage, a new alarm blared on the Dauntless's bridge. "Sir," the sensor officer cried out, his face ashen, "I'm picking up multiple warp signatures. It's a full Klingon battle group closing fast." Dennis slammed his fist onto his armrest, a wave of frustration washing over him. They were out of time. He opened his mouth to order a retreat, to save what was left of his crew, when Lieutenant Nesso's voice cut through the tumult. "Wait. I'm receiving a coded transmission from the Neso ship we came to rescue. They say they have a Tivorian cloaking device aboard, sir. One that can mask both our ships if we can dock with them and extend our shields around their vessel." Dennis stared at the amphibian, his mind reeling. Tivorian cloaking technology was the stuff of legend, said to be able to hide a ship from any known sensor. If the Neso were telling the truth. He made the decision in a split second. "Helm, lay in an intercept course for the Neso ship. Full speed. Lieutenant Neso, tell them to prepare for emergency docking maneuvers." As the Dauntless peeled away from the stricken Klingon battlecruiser, Cromac's eyes widened in disbelief. How dare the humans flee from him? But Dennis blocked out the Klingon's taunts, his entire being focused on the delicate task of aligning the Dauntless's damaged docking port with the Neso ship's airlock. Disruptor beams flashed past the viewport, barely missing the human ship as it hurtled towards its salvation. Dennis's hands flew over the controls, sweat beading on his brow. The Neso ship loomed larger and larger, the airlock a tiny dark promise of hope against the gleaming hull. With a bone-jarring thud, the Dauntless slammed into the Neso ship, its airlock clamping down like an iron vise. "Clamps secure, hull integrity holding," the ops officer reported, hands flying over her console. Dennis leapt from his chair. "Extending shields now," he barked. He spun to Lieutenant Neso. "Tell your people to hit that cloaking device and pray to whatever gods you believe in that it works as advertised." Neso's webbed fingers danced across his console, his large eyes unblinking. "Cloak engaging. Naku, now!" On the viewscreen, a rippling wave of distortion washed over the locked ships, like a heat shimmer on a summer road. Then, nothing. The ships vanished from sight, from sensors, from existence itself. Not a moment too soon. With a blaze of light, a full Klingon battle group dropped out of warp, disruptors charged and hungry for blood. On the screen, a scarred, one-eyed Klingon glowered from the bridge of the lead ship, his command chair more throne than seat. Kravchuk's voice boomed across the comm, dripping with disdain. "Kromak, you sniveling wretch, report. Where are the humans and the Neso ship you let slip through your clumsy claws?" On the screen, Kromak visibly wilted under his superior's glare, bravado evaporating. They escaped, sir. The humans intervened and—" "Escaped?" Kravchuk roared, spittle spraying. "You let a single human patrol ship best you? You're a disgrace to that uniform. Return to base immediately for disciplinary action. I'll deal with you later." As the comm snapped off, the Klingon ships wheeled away, leaping to warp one by one, until only the stars remained. Neso nodded slowly, blinking rapidly. "I never thought I'd see the day. Humans risking everything for Neso. After the galaxy abandoned us, left us to the Klingons' mercy, I thought we were alone." Dennis reached out, gripping Neso's shoulder. "You're not alone, not anymore. Humanity knows too well the pain of abandonment by those who should stand with you. Never again. Not while we draw breath." As the two ships uncoupled and Dennis prepared to contact Earth, to report on the day's world-shaking events, Neso turned to him, spine straightening with purpose. "Commander Reyes, I have a request. I want to stay on the Dauntless, fight alongside you. Help shield others from my people's fate." Dennis blinked, then slowly smiled, clasping arms with Neso in the Neso way. "I can think of no finer addition to my crew. Welcome aboard, Lieutenant." As the Dauntless set course for home, stars streaking past, Dennis couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the start of something bigger, a sea change in humanity's role on the galactic stage. As the Dauntless set course for Earth, news of its audacious stand against the Klingons spread across the galaxy like a supernova. Aboard the battered but unbowed ship, Dennis watched in amazement as footage of their desperate battle played across every viewscreen, accompanied by breathless commentary from gleeful reporters. In an unprecedented act of defiance, the UES Dauntless engaged a Klingon warship head-on to protect a defenseless Neso vessel, a wide-eyed Narn journalist reported, her red eyes shining with something like hope. Commander Dennis Reyes and his valiant crew have delivered a powerful message to the galaxy. The days of standing idly by while the innocent suffer are over. As the Dauntless limped into Earth orbit, Dennis found himself greeted by cheering crowds and a flood of messages from every corner of the quadrant. The Neso hailed him as a savior. The Andorians praised his courage. Even the normally inscrutable Vulcans expressed admiration for his principled stand. But not everyone was celebrating. On the gleaming Citadel Station, seat of the Galactic Council, the mood was one of barely controlled panic. In closed-door sessions that stretched long into the artificial night, the assembled dignitaries argued furiously over how to respond to this unexpected disruption of the status quo. "The humans have gone too far this time," the Tellarite ambassador sputtered, his porcine face flushed with anger. "We cannot allow one rogue species to unilaterally redraw the galactic map." "The map was already being redrawn," the Narn representative countered, her voice sharp. "By the Klingons with our tacit permission. At least the humans have the spine to stand up to tyranny." As the debate raged on, Dennis found himself called into a private briefing with Admiral Jan, the stern-faced head of Human High Command. The older man wasted no time on pleasantries. Commander Reyes, your actions have placed us in a delicate position, Jean said, his dark eyes boring into Dennis's. The Galactic Council is demanding we hand you over for disciplinary action. The Klingons are threatening war if we don't comply. Dennis opened his mouth to protest, but Jean silenced him with a sharp gesture. We cannot be seen to condone your insubordination, the Admiral continued, but neither can we ignore the bravery and principles you've demonstrated, which is why I'm giving you new orders. Off the record. Jan slid a data chip across the table to Dennis. You are to undertake a covert mission deep in Klingon space. Gather intel on their military capabilities, disrupt their supply lines, buy time for the Council to get their heads out of their asses. You'll be operating without official support or sanction. If you're caught, we'll disavow any knowledge of your actions. Dennis picked up the chip, his mind already racing with possibilities. Understood, sir. We won't let you down. With that, Dennis found himself back aboard the Dauntless, the data chip heavy in his pocket. He called a meeting of his senior staff in the dimly lit briefing room. As his officers filed in, he could read the determination etched on each face. They knew, without being told, that everything had changed. We have our orders, Dennis said without preamble. He outlined the mission in broad strokes, watching as eyes widened and spines straightened. It won't be easy, he warned. We'll be on our own out there, no backup. There's a good chance some of us might not come back. But this is what we signed up for, to make a difference, to stand up for what's right. Dennis leaned forward, his gaze sweeping the room, making eye contact with each member of his crew, his family. The Klingons think they can bully the galaxy into submission, that the strong can do as they please, and the weak have no recourse. Well, we're going to show them that the days of humanity standing by while others suffer are done. We're going to hit them where it hurts, and we're going to keep hitting them until they realize their days of tyranny are numbered. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. I can't order you to do this, it's too much to ask. So I'm asking for volunteers. Who's with me? For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Then Lieutenant Nesso stood, his amphibious features set in resolve. One by one the others stood. Tactical Officer Haruki, Chief Engineer Sorensen, Dr. Alvarez, Comms Specialist Thorne, every human, every member of the crew, regardless of species or background, united in singular purpose. Then let's get to work. We have a galaxy to save. As the Dauntless slipped its moorings and set course for the stars, its crew knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger and doubt. But they also knew, with bone-deep certainty, that they were on the right side of history. As the Dauntless sliced through the inky void of Klingon space, Dennis hunched over the command console, his eyes tracking the fluctuating power levels of the Tivorian cloak. The ship drifted past yet another Klingon patrol, the alien vessel's sensor beams sliding over the Dauntless's hull like probing fingers. Dennis held his breath. Beside him, Lieutenant Nesso's webbed hands danced across the engineering console, making minute adjustments to the cloak's resonance frequency. Steady, Nesso murmured, his large eyes unblinking. Adjust your heading by 0.03 degrees to port. Their tachyon scanners are sweeping that quadrant. Dennis complied, his fingers flying over the controls. The Klingon ships slid past, their crews oblivious to the phantom vessel lurking in their midst. Another close call, Dennis said, releasing a pent-up breath. Your knowledge of Klingon systems has been invaluable, Lieutenant. I don't know how we'd manage without you. Neso inclined his head, a naso gesture of respect. My people have studied Klingon technology for generations, looking for weaknesses. It's an honor to put that knowledge to use alongside humanity. Over the following days, Neso worked closely with the Dauntless's crew, teaching them the intricacies of Klingon tactics and technology. Under the amphibians' patient tutelage, the humans learned to think like their foe, to anticipate their moves and exploit their blind spots. The Klingons are aggressive but predictable, Neso explained during one training session. They rely on brute force and intimidation. By being unpredictable ourselves, by striking where they least expect it, we can turn their strengths into weaknesses. Dennis nodded, absorbing the lesson. Misdirection and subterfuge, then. The tools of the underdog. Precisely, Nesso said, his lipless mouth curving in an approximation of a smile. As the Dauntless ventured deeper into enemy territory, Dennis and his senior staff gathered in the dimly lit briefing room, a holographic display of their first target rotating slowly above the table. This is Quebec Shipyard, Dennis said, his face bathed in the display's ghostly blue light. According to our intel, it's one of the largest shipbuilding facilities in the Empire, responsible for a significant fraction of their total military output. The display zoomed in, highlighting the shipyard's sprawling network of dry docks, assembly bays, and reactor cores. If we can cripple this facility, even temporarily, it would deal a massive blow to the Klingons' war machine, Chief Engineer Sorensen said, her eyes glinting with barely contained excitement. But the place is a fortress, layered defenses, constant patrols, sensor nets covering every approach vector. Nothing is impenetrable, Dennis said, a hard edge to his voice. We just need to find the cracks. For the next week, the Dauntless lurked on the fringes of the shipyard's sensor range, the crew working in shifts to maintain constant surveillance. They watched, they waited, they learned. Slowly, patterns began to emerge. Gaps in the patrol routes, brief windows where the sensor nets flickered and went dark for maintenance. Tiny flaws, invisible to the complacent Klingon overseers, but glaring beacons of opportunity to Dennis and his crew. There, Dennis said, stabbing a finger at a schematic of the shipyard's central control hub. That's our point of entry. A small team can infiltrate through this service duct, make their way to the control room, and upload the virus. The virus, a masterpiece of destructive code crafted by Sorensen and her team, was designed to tear through the shipyard's systems like a scythe, overloading reactors, shutting down safety protocols, and turning the Klingons' own automated construction systems against them. It'll be a massacre, Sorensen said, her voice a mix of grim satisfaction and quiet horror. By the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late. Dennis met the eyes of each member of the infiltration team in turn. This is it, he said, his voice low and intense. This is where we start to turn the tide, but it won't be easy. Some of us may not come back. If anyone wants to back out, now's the time. No shame, no judgment. Silence greeted his words, every face etched with determination. We're with you, sir, Lieutenant Nesso said, speaking for all of them. To whatever end? Dennis nodded, pride and fear warring in his chest. Then let's get to work. Under cover of darkness, a single shuttle detached from the Dauntless underside, its black hull nearly invisible against the starfield. It drifted towards the shipyard, a mote of dust in the cosmic void. Inside, Dennis and his team checked their weapons, their faces grim and focused in the red glow of the shuttle's running lights. Approaching entry point, the pilot reported, her voice tense. Engaging electromagnetic cloak now. The shuttle shuddered as the cloak engaged, the hull polarizing to deflect sensor beams and mask its thermal signature. It slipped through the shipyard's outer defenses like a ghost, undetected and unremarked. With a muffled clang, the shuttle's docking clamps engaged around the lip of the service duct, the airlock cycling open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Dennis was the first one through, his boots ringing on the metal grating of the duct. The rest of the team followed, moving with practiced efficiency, sealing the airlock behind them. At last, they reached the control room, the door sealed and locked with a glowing biometric scanner. Sorensen stepped forward, a device the size of a deck of cards in her hand. She pressed it against the scanner, the device whirring and clicking as it ran through thousands of possible genetic combinations. With a soft beep, the scanner flashed green, the lock disengaging. Dennis and his team burst into the room, weapons raised. The Klingon technicians inside looked up in shock, their hands reaching for weapons. They never stood a chance. Dennis's team cut them down with ruthless efficiency, the sharp bark of silenced pulse rifles filling the air. As the last Klingon fell, Sorensen darted to the central console, her fingers flying over the controls. "Uploading the virus now," she reported, her voice tight with concentration. "It's in. Estimated time to system failure, 3 minutes." "Time to go," Dennis barked, "but move." They ran, retracing their steps through the maze of ducts and corridors. Behind them, the first explosions began to rumble through the station, the deck shuddering beneath their feet. They burst into the docking bay to find chaos waiting for them. Alarms blared, Klingon soldiers pouring into the bay, disruptors raised. A fierce firefight erupted, pulse beams and disruptor blasts crisscrossing the space in a deadly web. Dennis and his team fought their way to the shuttle, laying down a withering cover fire. But the Klingons kept coming, heedless of their losses, driven by rage and bloodlust. As Sorensen vanished inside, Dennis and the others formed a perimeter around the shuttle, a dwindling island of defiance in a sea of enemies. One by one his people fell. Brave men and women who had followed him to hell and back, cut down in an instant by Klingon steel. Lieutenant Nesso caught a disruptor blast to the chest, his amphibious features contorting in agony as he crumpled to the deck. Dennis caught him, dragged him towards the shuttle, leaving a trail of dark blood in their wake. "So you're going to be okay," Dennis lied through gritted teeth, even as the light faded from Nesso's eyes. "Just hold on." With a final Herculean effort, Dennis hurled himself and Nesso's limp form through the airlock, the door slamming shut behind them. "Punch it!" he roared, and the shuttle leapt forward, its engines flaring bright as it hurtled out of the docking bay and into open space. Behind them, the shipyard tore itself apart, secondary explosions chaining through its structure like firecrackers. Dry docks crumpled, reactor cores went critical, half-built ships ripped themselves to shreds on their own assembly lines. By the time the Dauntless caught the shuttle with its tractor beam and hauled it aboard, the shipyard was a twisted ruin, a tomb for thousands of Klingon warriors and workers. In the shuttle's blood-slicked hold, Dennis cradled Nesso's body, his face a mask of grief and rage. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I'm so sorry." But there was no time for mourning, no time for regrets. The Dauntless turned its bow towards the stars and leapt to warp, carrying its battered crew onwards to the next battle, the next sacrifice. Across the galaxy, the news of the shipyard's destruction spread like wildfire. In the halls of the Klingon High Council, generals and politicians alike howled for vengeance, decrying the attack as a cowardly act of terrorism. But in the chambers of the Galactic Council, a new tone was emerging. Tentative at first, but growing louder with each passing day. Voices that had long been silent began to speak out, to question the wisdom of appeasing the Klingons' endless aggression. "The humans have shown us the way," the Andorian ambassador said, her antennae quivering with emotion. "They have demonstrated that the Klingons are not invincible, that their brutality can be met with strength and courage." "The Klingons have sown the wind," the Vulcan representative intoned, his voice cold and logical. "Now they reap the whirlwind. It is only logical that those they have long oppressed should rise up against them." And on Earth, in the streets and spaceports, a change was taking hold. Gone was the weariness, the resignation, the sense of helplessness in the face of an indifferent galaxy. In its place, a new spirit was rising, a spirit of defiance, of solidarity, of hope. In the shipyards and factories, a new fleet was taking shape, crewed by men and women who had seen the Dauntless's example and taken it to heart. They came from all walks of life, from all corners of the planet, rich and poor, young and old, united by a common purpose, to stand against tyranny, to defend the defenseless, to light a candle in the darkness of an uncaring universe. And at their head, a symbol and a rallying cry, the battered but unbroken form of the Dauntless and her valiant crew. Bloodied but unbowed, they ventured forth once more into the void, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For they were the tip of the spear, the vanguard of a new era. An era in which humanity would no longer be a bystander, but a defender. An era in which the strong would protect the weak, and the light of justice would shine bright against the darkness of oppression. The road ahead would be long and hard, paved with sacrifice and sorrow, but they would walk it nonetheless, step by step, battle by battle. For they were the dauntless, and they would not yield. Dennis stood on the dauntless bridge, his eyes locked on the tactical display. The holographic map showed Klingon patrol routes crisscrossing the sector like a tangled web, but something was different. The once predictable patterns had given way to erratic movements, ships doubling back on themselves or veering off on seemingly random tangents. "They're scared," Dennis murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "They don't know where we'll strike next." Lieutenant Nesso stepped up beside him, his amphibious features illuminated by the display's ghostly light. "We've got them on the back foot, sir. They're reacting, not thinking." Dennis nodded, his mind racing. This was the opportunity they'd been waiting for, the chance to deal a blow the Klingons wouldn't soon forget. But to do that, they needed to hit them where it really hurt. "The command hub," he said, turning to face Nesso fully. "If we could take that out, it would cripple their entire war effort." Nesso's large eyes blinked slowly. "It won't be easy, sir. The location of the hub is one of the Empire's most closely guarded secrets." "Then we need that secret," Dennis said, his jaw set with determination, "and I think I know how to get it." The plan was simple in concept, audacious in execution. The Dauntless would lure a high-ranking Klingon warship into an ambush, disable it, and board it. The goal: capture the commanding general and extract the location of the command hub by any means necessary. Dennis assembled his boarding team in the armory, the air thick with tension and the metallic scent of oiled weapons. He met each of their gazes in turn, seeing the same steely resolve reflected back at him. "This won't be like our other raids," he said, his voice low and intense. "We'll be going in hard and fast straight for the bridge. Expect heavy resistance." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "But if we pull this off, we could end the war, bring peace to the galaxy. That's worth any risk, any sacrifice." There was a chorus of nods and murmured assent. These were the best of the best, handpicked by Dennis for their skill and their unwavering dedication to the cause. They geared up in silence, checking power packs and donning heavy combat armor. Dennis slid his trusty plasma rifle into its maglock on his back, the weapon's weight a familiar comfort. Then they were in the shuttle bay, the sleek assault craft waiting like a crouched predator. As the team strapped in, Dennis felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Nesso, his expression unreadable. "Good hunting," the Nesso said simply. "May your aim be true and your resolve unbreakable." Dennis clasped the alien's forearm in the warrior's grip. "We'll get it done, Lieutenant. For the Nesso, for humanity, for everyone." The assault craft detached from the Dauntless's belly, engines flaring as it dove towards the Klingon warship below. The larger vessel loomed in the viewports, its angular hull bristling with armaments. 30 seconds to contact," the pilot reported, her voice tight with concentration. "Brace for impact." The assault craft slammed into the warship's hull like a battering ram, magnetic clamps locking on with a resounding clang. The boarding team was up and moving before the echoes faded, stacking up at the airlock. The airlock blew inward with a flash of thermite, and then they were through, plasma rifles spitting blue fire. Klingon warriors roared challenges as they charged into the fray, batleths gleaming in the strobing emergency lights. They fought their way through the warship's corridors, a relentless tide of human fury. Klingons fell before them, but not without cost. Dennis saw his people cut down, saw the light fade from their eyes as they gave their lives for the mission. But there was no time to mourn, no time for anything but the next target, the next objective. They pushed forward, inexorable, unstoppable. And then they were at the bridge, the final bastion. The doors were triple-reinforced durasteel, but they might as well have been paper before the commandos' breaching charges. They blasted their way in, smoke and shrapnel whirling, and there he was. The general stood at the center of the bridge, a massive Klingon with a face like a crag of granite, and eyes that smoldered with barely contained rage. He wore the ornate armor of a high commander, the gold-worked leather stained with the blood of his slain bridge crew. "Surrender," Dennis called out, his rifle trained unwaveringly on the general's broad chest. "It's over." The Klingon's lip curled in a sneer of pure disdain. "Surrender? To you, human? I would rather die 1,000 deaths." He spat on the deck, the globule steaming on the scorched metal. "You may have bested my warriors, but you'll get nothing from me. No Klingon would ever betray the Empire." Dennis stepped forward, his boots crunching on the shattered remains of consoles. "The Empire has betrayed itself," he said, his voice low and intense. "It has forgotten what it means to be Klingon. Honor, loyalty, the warrior's code, these have been cast aside in favor of cruelty and conquest." The general's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. "What glory is there in slaughtering the innocent?" Dennis pressed. "What honor in crushing those weaker than yourself? The Klingon Empire was once a beacon to the galaxy, a nation of proud warriors. Now it is a blight, a cancer that must be cut out." "Lies!" the general growled, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes now. "You know nothing of the Klingon heart, human." "I know that there are still those among your people who remember the old ways," Dennis countered. "Those who look at what the Empire has become and feel shame. Are you one of them, General? Do you have the courage to face the truth?" For a long, tense moment, the only sound was the hiss and pop of ruptured conduits, the distant wail of alarms. Then, slowly, the fight seemed to drain out of the general's massive frame. "What would you have of me?" he asked, his voice leaden with defeat. "To the location of the Central Command Hub," Dennis said. "Give us that and we can end this war. We can save your people from themselves." The general closed his eyes, his face a mask of grief. "You ask much, human. To betray the heart of the Empire itself." Lieutenant Neso stepped forward, his voice gentle. "It is not betrayal to save your people from a path of darkness," he said. "It is the highest form of loyalty, the truest expression of a warrior's duty." The general was silent for a long moment. Then, with a shuddering breath, he spoke. "The hub is located in the Coronar system," he said, each word seeming to pain him. "Orbiting the third moon of the second planet. It is shielded and heavily guarded." Dennis nodded, committing the information to memory. "Thank you, General. Your courage will not be forgotten." They left the general there, a broken figure amidst the ruins of his command. As they made their way back to the assault craft, Dennis could feel the weight of what they had learned settling on his shoulders. The command hub, the nerve center of the entire Klingon war machine. If they could take it out, it would be a blow the Empire might never recover from. But it wouldn't be easy. The defenses would be formidable, the resistance fierce. Many would undoubtedly die in the attempt. As they docked with the Dauntless, and the familiar hum of the ship's engines surrounded them, Dennis gathered his crew in the briefing room. "We have the location of the command hub," he said without preamble, "uploading the coordinates now." The holographic display shimmered, resolving into a star map with a pulsing red dot at its center. "As you can see, it's deep in Klingon space, heavily fortified, but it's also the key to ending this war once and for all." Dennis leaned forward, his gaze intense. "I won't lie to you. This will be the most dangerous mission we've ever undertaken. The risks are enormous, but so are the stakes." He took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. "I'm asking for volunteers. Anyone who wants to stay behind, I understand. No judgment, no recriminations. This is above and beyond anything you signed up for." For a moment there was silence. Then one by one every hand in the room rose. Every face was set with grim determination. Dennis felt a swell of pride, of humility. These were his people, his family, and they were with him come what may. "All right then," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Let's get to work. We have a war to win." The Dauntless surged forward, engines blazing as it tore through the void towards its destiny. In the command chair, Dennis felt a curious sense of calm settle over him. Whatever happened, whatever the cost, they would see this through. For the sake of the galaxy, for the sake of all those who looked to them for hope, they would not fail. The command hub loomed before them, a sprawling complex of interlocking modules and bristling gun emplacements. It hung in the void like a malevolent spider, tendrils of ships and defenses reaching out to ensnare any who dared approach. But the Dauntless had a few tricks up its sleeve. With the Tivorian cloak engaged, they slipped past the outer perimeter unseen, a ghost in the darkness. They docked at an auxiliary airlock, the team moving with silent efficiency. They knew the plan, knew their roles. Get in, plant the charges, get out. Simple in theory, deadly in practice. The first part went smoothly. The airlock cycled open and they were in, moving swiftly through the dimly lit maintenance corridors. Naso guided them, his knowledge of Klingon facility layouts invaluable. They reached the reactor core without incident, a vast chamber thrumming with barely contained energy. Sorensen and her engineering team went to work, planting the explosives at key structural points. But as they were finishing up, all hell broke loose. Alarms blared, blast doors slamming shut. The Klingons had discovered the intrusion. "We've been made," Dennis shouted over the sudden cacophony. "Everyone back to the ship now." They ran, the sound of pounding boots and angry shouts echoing behind them. Disruptor blasts sizzled past, scorching the bulkheads. Dennis returned fire on the move, his rifle a staccato counterpoint to the chaos. They reached the airlock, piling into the Dauntless. But as the ship detached, a new threat emerged. A Klingon warship decloaked directly above them, its weapons glowing with deadly intent. Dennis stared at the viewscreen, his mind racing. They couldn't fight, not here. The Dauntless was tough, but she was no match for a full-sized battlecruiser. But if they ran, the Klingons would pursue. The command hub would survive, and all their sacrifices would be for nothing. There was only one choice, one path. Dennis felt a strange sense of peace settle over him as he turned to his crew. "Abandon ship," he said, his voice calm and clear amid the blaring alarms. "Get to the escape pods, scatter, and make for friendly space." Sorensen shook her head vehemently. "Sir, no, we're not leaving you." He forestalled further protest with a raised hand. "This is my duty, my responsibility. Now go, all of you." There were tears, desperate embraces, but in the end they obeyed. One by one the escape pods ejected, streaking away into the void. Dennis watched them go, a sad smile on his lips. Then he turned back to the viewscreen, to the looming spectre of the Klingon warship. The Dauntless leapt forward, guns blazing. It was a futile gesture, and Dennis knew it. The Klingon ship outclassed them in every way. But he didn't need to win. He just needed to buy time. The Dauntless shook under the onslaught, consoles erupting in showers of sparks. Dennis gritted his teeth against the impacts, his fingers stabbing at the controls. A lucky shot breached the hull, the bridge filling with acrid smoke. Dennis coughed, his eyes watering, but he didn't falter. The Klingon ship loomed larger, its disruptors hammering at the Dauntless's failing shields. Just a little longer. Just a few more seconds. With a final defiant roar, Dennis slammed his fist down on the detonator. The command hub vanished in a sun-bright flash, a new star blooming to life in the endless night. The Klingon ship vanished with it, consumed by the apocalyptic blast. And on the bridge of the dying Dauntless, Dennis smiled. They had done it. Against all odds, they had struck a blow that would shake the Klingon Empire to its core. As the fires raged around him and the darkness closed in, Dennis's last thought was of his crew, his brave, loyal, indomitable crew. They would carry on. They would finish what he had started, and the galaxy would never be the same. Across the Klingon Empire, chaos reigned. With the destruction of the command hub, the intricate web of communications and control that held the far-flung reaches of the Empire together had been severed. Fleets found themselves cut off, orders unheard or unheeded. Colonies and outposts, long held in check by the iron fist of Central Command, erupted in open revolt. On 100 worlds, the downtrodden and oppressed rose up against their Klingon masters, the whisper of Dennis's name and the tale of the Dauntless's sacrifice on every lip. In the halls of power on Konos, the Klingon homeworld, the High Council descended into bickering and recrimination. Without the military to enforce their will, the old divisions and rivalries came roaring to the surface. Some called for a redoubling of efforts, a brutal crackdown to restore order. Others, seeing the writing on the wall, began to distance themselves from the hardliners, seeking accommodation with the growing rebel movements. But it was too little, too late. The Empire, once an unstoppable juggernaut, was coming apart at the seams. The subject races, so long under the Klingon boot, could taste freedom, and they would not be denied. On the fringes of Klingon space, a ragtag fleet gathered. Ships of every make and model, crewed by beings of every race and creed, united in purpose, united in grief and rage and desperate hope. At their head was a battered Nesso cruiser, and on its bridge stood Lieutenant Nesso. No, not Lieutenant, not anymore. Captain Nesso surveyed his motley armada, his heart swelling with a fierce pride. They had come so far, endured so much, and now, with the Empire in disarray, they had a chance to strike the final blow. To finish what Dennis had started, to forge a new galaxy from the ashes of the old. Nesso squared his shoulders, feeling the weight of command settling upon him. It was a burden he would bear gladly, in memory of the man who had shown him what true leadership meant. The fleet surged forward as one, 1,000 pinpricks of light against the starfield, each one a promise, a vow. The Klingon Empire had fallen, and from its ruins something new would rise. In the shattered remnants of the dauntless escape pods, Nesso and the surviving crew drifted, numb with grief and exhaustion. The loss of Commander Dennis Reyes, the man who had led them, inspired them, weighed heavily on every heart. But as a fleet of Nesso ships emerged from the void, hope flickered back to life. The escape pods were tractored aboard, the battered humans welcomed as heroes. In the great hall of the Nesso flagship, Nesso stood before a cheering throng, his crew beside him. The destruction of the command hub has struck a blow against our oppressors that will echo across the galaxy, the Nesso admiral declared, his voice booming. But the fight is far from over. The Klingon Empire may be wounded, but it is not yet broken. It will lash out, more desperate and dangerous than ever. Who will take up the banner of freedom and carry on the fight? Nesso stepped forward, his spine straight, his eyes blazing with purpose. "I will," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. Dennis Reyes was more than my captain. He was my friend, my mentor. He showed me what courage truly means. I vow to carry on his legacy, to fight for the freedom of all those the Klingons have enslaved. A cheer went up from the assembled Nesso, a sound that shook the very bulkheads. In that moment a new alliance was born, a coalition of the oppressed ready to rise up and shatter their chains. In the days that followed, Nesso threw himself into his new role. As captain of the UES Phoenix, he reached out to the other races who had suffered under Klingon rule. The proud Tarka, the brilliant Vel, the wise Iridians, one by one they answered his call. Aboard the Phoenix a new crew took shape. There was Tark, the Tarka marksman, his eyes haunted by the ghosts of his slaughtered family. Vela, the Vel technician, her fingers dancing over a computer console with almost supernatural speed. And Eerie, the silver-tongued Iridian, his words a weapon as potent as any blaster. Together they planned and schemed, determined to end the Klingon threat once and for all. And their first target would be the most daring yet, the heart of the Klingon Empire itself. Disguised as a diplomatic envoy from a neutral power, the Phoenix slipped into orbit around the Klingon homeworld. Nesso and his team beamed down to the surface, their false identities and forged papers passing muster with the suspicious Klingon guards. They were welcomed with all the pomp and circumstance the Klingons could muster, a grand banquet thrown in their honor. Nesso smiled and nodded, raising his glass in toast after toast, all the while scanning the room, marking the positions of the guards, the locations of the exits. As the Klingon High Council, the shadowy cabal that ruled the Empire, took their seats at the high table, Nesso caught Tark's eye. The Tarka gave a barely perceptible nod. It was time. Chaos erupted as Nesso and his team sprang into action. Tark's blaster spat crimson fire, dropping the guards before they could even reach for their weapons. Vela's fingers flew over a concealed datapad, the doors slamming shut and locking with a resounding clang. Irie's voice boomed out over the sudden din. demanding the Council's surrender. The Klingons, of course, did not surrender easily. They fought with all the savagery and skill of their warrior race, but Nesso's team was ready. They had planned for every contingency, drilled every maneuver, and they had something the Klingons did not: the righteous fury of the oppressed, the burning need for justice too long denied. In the end, the Council was subdued, bound and gagged and hustled out of the palace under cover of darkness. Nesso and his team raced through the night-shrouded streets, phasers blasting at the Klingon patrols who tried to block their path. They reached the Phoenix, the Council in tow, and blasted off into the star-strewn sky. But their escape did not go unnoticed. As they broke orbit, the sensors screamed a warning. A massive Klingon fleet, the entire might of the homeworld's defenses, was bearing down on them. Nesso knew they couldn't outrun them. The Phoenix was fast, but she was no match for the sheer number of ships now pursuing them. He stared at the tactical display, his mind racing, and then he made his decision. "We need to buy time for the rest of the Alliance to get clear with the Council," he said, his voice steady despite the fear clutching at his heart. "We're going to turn and fight." His crew looked at him, their faces a mix of determination and trepidation. They knew what he was asking. They knew the odds, but they also knew what was at stake. One by one, they nodded. "Tark, man the weapons," Nesso ordered. "Vela, divert all power to shields. Iri, open a channel to the fleet. Tell them to go to get the Council to safety. We'll hold the line." The Phoenix pivoted, her engines flaring, and charged headlong into the teeth of the Klingon fleet. Phaser beams and photon torpedoes lanced out, the Klingon ships blooming into fireballs one after another. But it wasn't enough. For every ship they destroyed, 10 more seemed to take its place. The Phoenix shuddered under the onslaught, her shields flickering, her hull buckling. Nesso gritted his teeth, his hands flying over the controls. He could see the rest of the Alliance fleet on the sensors, see them warping away one by one. Just a little longer. Just a few more seconds. The Phoenix lurched as a torpedo found its mark, the bridge exploding in a shower of sparks and smoke. Nesso felt a searing pain in his side, felt the warm wetness of blood. But he didn't falter. His crew needed him. The galaxy needed him. The lights flickered, the artificial gravity wavering. Nesso could feel the Phoenix dying around him, could feel the icy breath of the void on his neck. But still he fought on, his crew beside him, united in their defiance to the last. They would not go quietly. They would not let the Klingons snuff out the spark of hope they had kindled. If this was to be their end, they would make it an end worthy of remembrance. Nesso stared out at the sea of enemy ships, a strange calm settling over him. He thought of Dennis, of the sacrifice he had made. He thought of his people, of all the oppressed races of the galaxy, yearning to breathe free. He turned to his crew, to these beings who had become closer than family. "It has been an honor," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "An honor to fight beside you, to call you my friends. Whatever happens, know that we made a difference. Know that because of us, the galaxy will never be the same." As one, they turned back to their stations, back to the fight. The Phoenix was in her death throes now, consoles sparking, bulkheads groaning, but she had one last surprise in store for the Klingons. "Warp core breach imminent," the computer warned, its voice eerily calm amid the chaos. "Destruction of ship in 30 seconds. "This is Captain Nesso of the UES Phoenix," he said, his voice ringing out across the void. "We have your counsel. Your empire is finished, and we are prepared to die to ensure it. Surrender now, and your leaders will be returned to you. Fight on, and they die with us. The choice is yours." The Klingons, faced with the destruction of their leadership, hesitated. Their fire slackened, their ships pulling back. Nesso closed his eyes, picturing the green hills of his homeworld, the smiling faces of his crew, Dennis welcoming him into the light. The Phoenix exploded, a miniature sun blooming in the darkness of space. The shockwave caught the nearest Klingon ships, tossing them aside like leaves in a hurricane. And in that moment, As the light of the Phoenix's dying breath illuminated the void, the galaxy held its breath. For the first time in centuries, the oppressed of the galaxy dared to dream of a future without fear, without the boot of Klingon tyranny on their necks. The spark had been lit, the fire had begun, and though Neso and his crew were gone, their sacrifice would burn forever in the hearts of all those who yearned for freedom. The fight was far from over. The Klingons, leaderless and reeling, would not go down without a fight. There would be hard days ahead, days of blood and fire and tears. But the alliance had been forged, the die cast, and across the galaxy, in the shipyards and factories and training grounds of 100 worlds, a new force was rising, a force dedicated to the dream that Neso and Dennis and so many others had died for. The dream of a galaxy united, a galaxy at peace, a galaxy where every being, regardless of race or creed, could live free and unafraid. It was a dream worth fighting for, a dream worth dying for, and fight they would until the last Klingon banner was torn down, until the last shackle was broken. For Dennis, for Neso, for the Neso and the Taka and the Vel and the Iridians and all the rest, for the future. The alliance had been born in the fires of sacrifice, and in those fires it would be forged into something unbreakable, something eternal. The galaxy would never be the same. The Phoenix shuddered violently, a straining groan echoing through its hull as another volley of Klingon torpedoes slammed into the failing shields. Neso gripped the command chair, his knuckles pale, his eyes fixed on the viewscreen filled with the looming warships. Consoles sparked and smoked around him, the acrid stench of burning plastic filling the air. Neso set his jaw, a cold resignation settling in his gut. This was it. They had fought valiantly, struck a blow the Klingons would not soon forget, but there was no escape, no clever stratagem left to play. The Phoenix was a dying beast, and it would take them with it into the void. He opened his mouth to give the order to abandon ship, to at least give his crew a fighting chance, but the words died on his lips as a shimmering anomaly bloomed on the viewscreen, a swirling vortex of light and energy, tearing open the very fabric of space. Neso shook his head at a loss. A wormhole. Here it was unheard of. His heart seized as sleek silver ships poured from the rift, dozens of them, their hulls gleaming in the light of the stars. They were unlike anything he had ever seen, all graceful lines and thrumming power, bristling with advanced weapons and shimmering with the telltale distortion of high-powered shields. "More Klingons," Iri whispered, his face ashen. Neso's hands tightened on the armrests. Had the Klingons been holding back their true might all this time? Had this all been some cruel game, a cat toying with a mouse before the final pounce? But then the lead ship hailed them, and a voice crackled over the comm that made Neso's heart stop. "Dennis!" he croaked. The viewscreen flickered, and there he was. Dennis Reyes, his face lined and his hair greying at the temples, but with that same indomitable glint in his eye. He was standing on the bridge of a ship Neso had never seen, sleek and powerful, the very air around him seeming to thrum with purpose. I don't understand," Neso stammered. "We saw the Dauntless destroyed. We thought—" Dennis's smile was gentle, understanding. "Reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. I managed to beam out at the last second, just before the hub blew. Been back on Earth, rallying the troops, you might say. What you're looking at is the first wave, the vanguard of humanity's response to the Klingon threat. We're here to stand with our allies, Neso, till the end." As if to punctuate his words, the human ships opened fire, lances of searing light and shimmering torpedoes leaping from their arsenals. The Klingon ships, still reeling from the sudden arrival, scattered like leaves before a hurricane, their formation breaking apart. The Phoenix's crew watched in awe as the human fleet moved with a grace and precision they had never seen, outmaneuvering the Klingons at every turn. It was like a dance, a deadly ballet of fire and light, and the humans were the undisputed masters. Under the onslaught of this new terrifying foe, the Klingons broke. One by one their ships turned tail and fled, warping away until only the wreckage of their fallen comrades remained. A cheer went up on the Phoenix's bridge, cries of joy and disbelief mingling with sobs of relief. They had done it. Against all odds, against all hope, they had won. As the human ships took up formation around the battered Phoenix, Dennis's face filled the view screen once more. "Permission to come aboard, Captain Naso?" he asked, his eyes twinkling. Naso let out a shaky laugh, the weight of the last few hours crashing down on him all at once. "Permission granted, Commander Reyes. Welcome home." The airlock hissed open, and there he was, Dennis Reyes, hero of the Dauntless, the man who had started it all. He stepped onto the Phoenix's deck, and Nesso found himself moving forward as if in a dream. They met in the middle of the room, clasping hands, then embracing fiercely. There were no words, none that could encompass the magnitude of this moment, the depth of emotion that swelled between them. Around them, the crew of the Phoenix watched, some smiling, some openly weeping. They had all lost so much, had all sacrificed and bled and grieved. But here, now, in this moment of triumph, it all seemed worth it. Dennis pulled back, his eyes shining. "You did it, Nesso. You kept the fight alive. I always knew you would." Nesso shook his head, a lump in his throat. "We all did it, Dennis. The Dauntless, the Phoenix, the Alliance, we all kept the dream alive." Dennis nodded, his gaze distant for a moment. "The dream," he murmured. "A galaxy where all beings can live free, where the strong protect the weak. It's a dream worth fighting for, isn't it?" As the Phoenix and its new escort set course for the nearest friendly port, Nesso found himself standing at the viewport, staring out at the stars. So much had changed. So much had been lost and won and remade. The galaxy would never be the same, could never go back to what it was. But maybe, just maybe, that was a good thing. Maybe from the ashes of the old something new could rise, something better, something brighter. It wouldn't be easy. There were still battles to be fought, still sacrifices to be made. The Klingons were broken but not beaten, and there would be others who sought to fill the void they left, to bend the galaxy to their will. But Neso knew with a certainty that filled his every fiber that they would be ready. The alliance, the bond forged in blood and fire between human and Neso and Taka, and Vel and Iridian, would stand against any foe, weather any storm. They had already done the impossible, and they would keep doing it as long as it took, as long as there was breath in their bodies and fire in their hearts. This was only the beginning, the first chapter in a new saga, a tale that would echo through the ages, and Nesso was grateful, humbled and proud in equal measure to be a part of it. He felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Dennis standing beside him, that same quiet strength in his eyes that had first drawn Neso to him all those years ago. Neso straightened his spine, feeling the weight of the Phoenix pin on his chest, the symbol of all they had fought for, all they had become. "Ready as I'll ever be, Commander," he replied, returning the smile. "Let's go change the galaxy." As the Phoenix and its escort warped away from the smoldering ruins of the Klingon command hub, Nesso slumped in his command chair, exhaustion etched in every line of his amphibian features. They had struck a mighty blow against the Klingon war machine, but at a terrible cost. Dennis, his friend, his mentor, was gone, sacrificing himself to ensure their victory. Around him, the bridge crew of the Phoenix worked in somber silence, tending to damaged systems and wounded comrades. They all felt the weight of Dennis's loss, the void his absence left in their hearts. But there was no time to grieve, not yet. The war still raged, and the Klingons, though reeling, were far from beaten. Nesso forced himself to straighten, to push the pain down deep where it couldn't touch him. He had a duty to his crew, to the Alliance, to all those still suffering under Klingon oppression. He couldn't falter now. "Helm, set course for the rendezvous point," he ordered, his voice rough but steady. "Best speed. We need to regroup with the rest of the fleet, assess our losses, and plan our next move." "Aye, Captain," the helmsman responded crisply, hands flying over his console. But even as the Phoenix leapt to warp, the stars blurring into streaks of light, Nesso couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. Something wasn't right. They had dealt the Klingons a grievous blow, yes, but it had all seemed too easy. The Klingons were ruthless, cunning warriors. They wouldn't have left their command hub so vulnerable, so unprotected. Unless... Nesso's eyes widened with sudden realization, a cold dread settling in his gut. "Helm, drop us out of warp now," he barked. "Comms, get me a channel to the fleet, priority 1. But it was too late. Even as the Phoenix lurched back into normal space, the view screen filled with the sight of a battle already in progress. Klingon warships swarmed around the planet where they had been holding the captured Klingon council members, pouring fire into the beleaguered defense fleet. It was a trap. The Klingons had let them capture the council members, had sacrificed their command hub, all to draw the Alliance fleet out of position. And now, with their best ships and commanders light years away, the Klingons were striking at the very heart of the Alliance. "Raise shields, charge weapons," Nesso snapped, his mind racing. They had to get down there, had to reinforce the planet's defenses before it was too late. But even as he opened his mouth to give the order to attack, the comms console chirped with an incoming message. Dennis's face filled the screen, grim and battle-worn. "Nesso, I see it too," he said without preamble. "We've been outplayed. The Klingons are already landing ground troops and our forces are being overrun. We have to hit them now, with everything we've got, or we lose the planet and the Council." Nesso nodded, his throat tight. "Agreed. But we can't leave the Klingon flanks unguarded. If their reinforcements arrive—" "I know," Dennis said. "That's why we need to split our forces. I'll take the bulk of our ships and punch through to the planet. You take a smaller force and try to cut off the Klingon advance at its source. Stop their reinforcements from ever reaching the battlefield." It was a desperate gamble, spreading their forces thin in the face of a superior enemy. But what choice did they have? "Understood," Nesso said, his voice grim. "Good hunting, Dennis. I'll see you on the other side." The screen went dark, and Nesso turned to his crew, seeing his own fear and determination mirrored in their eyes. "You heard the man," he said. "Helm, lay in a course for the Klingon staging ground. Comms, signal our escort ships to form up on us. We've got a fleet to stop." As the Phoenix and its small but determined band of ships raced towards their destiny, Nesso gripped the arms of his command chair, his knuckles white. This was it, the moment of truth. Succeed or fail, live or die, the fate of the Alliance hung in the balance. The Klingon dreadnought loomed before them, a behemoth of steel and hatred, bristling with enough firepower to reduce a planet to molten slag. Its hull seemed to swallow the very light, a black hole given form and purpose. Nesso swallowed hard, forcing down the fear that threatened to choke him. They couldn't fight this thing, not head-on. It would be suicide, a slaughter. But what choice did they have? "Launch decoy drones," he ordered, an idea forming in his mind. "Have them project false sensor signatures, make it look like we're attacking from multiple vectors." His crew obeyed without question, their faith in him absolute. A swarm of drones burst from the Phoenix's launch bays, each one a perfect replica of an Alliance warship, at least to the Klingons' sensors. The dreadnought's guns swiveled, tracking the new threats with relentless precision. It opened fire, its beams of disruptor energy lancing out to swat the drones from the sky one by one. But it was working. The dreadnought's attention was divided, its fire spread thin, and in that moment of distraction, Nesso saw their chance. The Phoenix and its escorts surged forward, racing towards the dreadnought's unprotected underbelly, even as the drones swarmed around it like angry hornets. They were going to make it. They were going to... A stray shot from the dreadnought, a beam of energy that could have vaporized a moon, clipped the wing of one of Nesso's ships. It spun out of control, careening into the ship beside it in a blossom of fire and debris. And then it was chaos. Ships slamming into each other, explosions chaining across the formation. The Phoenix shuddered as a chunk of burning wreckage slammed into its shields, alarms screaming across the bridge. Nesso clung to his chair as his ship bucked and heaved, consoles exploding around him, the acrid stench of smoke and blood filling the air. He saw his crew, his friends, torn apart by flying shrapnel or burned alive by ruptured plasma lines. This was the end. It had to be. No one could survive this hell, this maelstrom of fire and death. But through the pain, through the grief and the rage, Neso forced himself to stand. He staggered to the helm, shoving aside the broken body of his helmsman to grab the controls. "Abandon ship," he croaked into the calm, his voice raw and broken. "All hands, abandon ship, get to the escape pods." He would stay with his ship, with his crew. He would buy them the time they needed to escape, to live. It was all he could do now. The Phoenix, trailing fire and wreckage, turned ponderously towards the dreadnought, its guns still blazing defiantly. Neso gritted his teeth, pouring every last ounce of power into the engines. If he was going to die, he would take as many of these Klingon bastards with him as he could. But even as his finger tightened on the trigger, the bridge doors exploded inward. Klingon warriors poured through the breach, their blades glinting in the firelight. Neso roared his challenge, snatching up a fallen phaser and laying into the boarders with reckless fury. They fell before him, one after another, but there were always more. Her blade found his gut, a searing line of agony that doubled him over. Another slashed across his back, sending him stumbling to his knees. Through a haze of pain, he looked up to see a Klingon looming over him, a sneer of triumph on his cruel face. "Who you thought you could defeat us?" the Klingon snarled, his blade poised for the killing blow. "You underestimated the strength and cunning of the Klingon Empire. Now, you will pay the price for your arrogance." Neso bared his teeth in a bloody grin, defiant to the last. "You may kill me," he rasped, "but you cannot kill what we have started. The Alliance will live on, and one day we will see the end of your tyranny." The Klingon roared his fury, his blade flashing down. Neso closed his eyes, ready for the end. But the blow never came. A blinding flash seared through Neso's eyelids, a thunderclap that shook the very bones of the ship. "I got here as fast as I could," Dennis said, kneeling beside Neso and pressing a hand to his wounds. "The planet is safe, and the Klingon fleet is in full retreat. We've won, Neso. We've won." Neso laughed, a wet, broken sound. He could feel his strength fading, his life ebbing away. "No, my friend," he whispered. "You have won. The Alliance, the galaxy, they are in your hands now. Promise me. Promise me you will finish what we started." Dennis gripped Neso's hand, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I promise," he said, his voice fierce and low. "I will not rest until the Klingon Empire is brought to justice and every race in the galaxy is free." Neso smiled, peace settling over him like a warm blanket. He had done his part, fought the good fight. Now it was up to others to carry on the struggle. As the darkness closed in, as his final breath rattled in his chest, Neso knew that the galaxy was in good hands. Dennis would carry on his legacy, the legacy of the Dauntless. The flame of hope and freedom would never be extinguished, not while heroes like Dennis Reyes drew breath. Not while the Alliance, forged in the fires of war and tempered by sacrifice, still stood. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.